Your cybersecurity solution is here. Introducing Pentester's Advanced Cybersecurity Suite. Ready for peace of mind? Try it for free. No credit card required. Pentester.com.
So we were good friends with Joe Messina, who at the time was the banana boss. And I happened to see Joe Messina. He used to go every day to a diner on Crosby Boulevard and hold court there every morning. And I would frequent that. I'm willing to pay, but I don't have $18,000. He said, I don't have it. Could we make a deal? So I asked him, how much could you afford? He said, I could afford, right now, I could give you $9,000. I could afford here. I had other sit-downs with captains over bookmaking debts too. I had a sit-down once with Genie Gotti, with a captain from New Jersey. His nephew had owed us money. Hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Ruggiano. I want to welcome everybody to Reform Gangsters. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, don't forget about Patreon. Membership start at $1. There's a lot of exclusive content on there, Q&As. So, check it out. Also, don't forget about my store. I have a lot of stuff up there now, hats, mugs, T-shirts, hoodies. Check it out. Mother's Day is coming this week. Father's Day is next month. A lot of good stuff. So tonight, a lot of people have been asking me about sit-downs, what happens at a sit-down, why does mob guys have sit-downs, what part does it play in the Mafia? And it plays a very big part. It's a business meeting, actually, where problems are resolved, where money exchanges hands, where businesses are formulated, where death sentences are passed. I mean, it goes from A to Z. I was involved in many sit-downs throughout the years, some life and death sit-downs, and some money exchange in hand sit-downs. I'll talk about the last sit-down I was involved in, and I'll explain to you the situation and the formality, because there's protocols also when it comes to sit-downs. So a sit-down is basically made members of the mob and associates, or just made members of the mob. If a captain is involved in the sit-down, if a made member, a button guy, a soldier guy is coming to a sit-down with his captain to sit down with another made member, that other made member also has to come with a captain. A made member, a soldier cannot sit down with a captain without permission. He has to have his captain with him, so there's protocols. The last sit-down I was involved the bookmaking debt, which is very common with sit-downs where people owe money or people try to get into businesses. It's always 90% of the time there's money involved. So the last sit-down I had was a fella was betting with us, and he owed me $18,000. Me and the bookmaker that was with us was called Eddie D. He was a bookmaker that was on record with our crew. And I serviced Eddie because I brought Eddie into the crew. He was my recruit, more or less. The sit-down involved the kid that owed me the money's father, who was with a captain named Louis Metropolitan that was with the Banana family. He had a club on Metropolitan Avenue. That's why his nickname was Louis Metropolitan. Mob nicknames, right? That's another story for another day. So we were good friends with Joe Messina, who at the time was the banana boss. And I happened to see Joe Messina. He used to go every day to a diner on Crosby Boulevard and hold court there every morning. And I would frequent that diner, and I would see him all the time. And he was very friendly with me. He knew me since I was a young kid. He would always pay my check, and I could talk to him, even though he was a boss, And so I told him that I needed to meet with Louis Metropolitan, and if it would be all right if I went with just Mikey Gow, who was Tony Lee's brother, who had passed away at the time because my father was in prison, if it would be all right if just me and Mikey went without Pete Gotti, who was Mikey's captain at the time. And he said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So we made an appointment to see Louis Metropolitan. We went up to his club in Metropolitan Avenue, and we sat down with myself, Mikey Gal, who was a soldier, and the Gambino family. Louis Metropolitan was a captain in the Bonanno family, and this fella that owed me the 18,000's father, who was with Louis. The kid that owed the money wasn't at the sit down. And the father, and I explained to the father, listen, your son owes us 18,000. Now you got to remember, bookmaking, everything's on paper. Like the kid wasn't into us for any money. Like it wasn't like he beat our brains in and won a lot of money, and now he owes us 18,000, not paying us. Minimum amounts of money had changed hands up to that point. So basically the 18,000 was all on paper, because back then it wasn't like today with the internet and apps. Back then everything was written down on slips. They called on a phone, we wrote it down on a slip, so everything was on paper. That's what we called it. That was the terminology back then. This was in the 90s, in the early 90s. After 93, it was 94, 95, like that. So the father said, listen, my son has no money. He took a shot, which was wrong. I'm willing to pay, but I don't have 18,000. He said, I don't have it. Could we make a deal? So I asked him, how much could you afford? He said, I could afford, right now, I could give you 9,000. I could afford half. So my father, Fat Andy, always told me a half loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. And being that it was all on paper, Eddie and I agreed to take the 9,000 and call it even. And then the father asked us to shut his son out, which he didn't even have to ask us. That's a no-brainer. That kid would have never bet with us again. That was, that's the end of the story. And that was the end of the sit down. Got paid 9,000, and we washed the other 9,000 away, and we walked away with 9,000, Eddie and I. So that was a sit down. I had other sit downs with captains over bookmaking debts too. I had a sit down once with Genie Gotti, with a captain from New Jersey. His nephew had owed us money. I got paid. I had a sit down over a murder, unfortunately, in 1977. My brother's friend Tommy was murdered in 88th Street Park, and we got called in on a sit down at Jimmy Brown's club with Paul Castellano over the death of Tommy, unfortunately. So I mean, I was in on many sit downs, and basically that's what it is. It's a meeting between mob guys to straighten out a beef. Could be life and death. It could be money. It could be a business. It could be over a lemon ice stand. I mean, they were sitting down over lemon ice stands a couple of years ago because the mob was trying to take over all the lemon ice stands in New York. So, I mean, it could be over anything.
What if someone made an off-color remark, a joke about a wise guy's wife's big ass? Would that be a cause?
Well, I mean, that's an episode of The Soprano. I mean, I have seen arguments break out at sit-downs. I mean, I have seen people get loud at sit-down. I mean, when we sat down with Dom DeSalo, when he hit me, I mean, my old man literally called him a fucking liar at the sit-down, and told him he'd put him through the ground if he ever raised his hands again to me. And that was with the Chin's brother at the table, John Gotti at the table, and a lot of big powerhouse guys at the table. I saw people get yelled at sit-downs, put in check at sit-downs. I saw people begging for the lives of people at sit-downs. My old man had a great saying when he used to go into sit-downs. He used to tell us, I may not be right, but I'll never be wrong. He was great at sit-downs because he never backed down. He never backed down. He was a great, there's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of it. But there's a word for that when people sit at business meetings and are good at it. But he was really good at it.
Where did the sit down originate?
Oh my God, probably when the mob originated. I mean, it was my whole life sit downs. I mean, it was probably forever, as long as the mob's been around. I mean, how else are they going to straighten things out unless they sit down and discuss it?
I kind of like the format.
Yeah, why not?
For the lay people, what's a soldier in the Italian mafia?
Well, there's an associate, then there's a soldier, then there's a captain, and then there's the the consigliere, the underboss, and the boss. So that's the format of the family.
Okay, so a wise guy is
Could be a soldier, could be a captain, a friend is a made member, a rabbi. He's bringing his rabbi with him. That was another slang. Button guy.
Going with the terms, friend of ours, friend of mine.
A friend of ours is a made member. A friend of mine is an associate.
How about the locations? What typically were the locations for these sit-downs? Neutral territory?
I mean, yeah, clubs back in the day, social clubs, restaurants, bars, in the street, parks. We had sit-downs in parks on park benches. I mean, I know when heat was on in the 90s, guys were having sit-downs on trains. They were getting on the A train and riding up and down on the A train, having sit-downs on the trains when they were hot. When they were being followed and having heat on them, they were having sit-downs on the trains. On the beach, guys would go up to the beach so they can't be taped and bugged. I mean, I even heard at one point, Joe Messina and them were actually going to another country, to one of the Caribbean islands, having meetings. They were going to when the heat was on. They were not even in the country because they didn't want to get charged with conspiracies.
Attention all realtors, check out listingtiger.com. Revolutionize your real estate listings with AI-powered descriptions that sell properties. Check out listingtiger.com. Use code MAGICLIST2024 for the first month free.
Hey, Anthony, a couple weeks ago,
Hey, what's going on?
Much, brother. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, a couple weeks ago, Jeff Nadu had a guy named Louis Castman. Did you know him?
Yeah, I know him. I wasn't really great friends with him, but he was always around John. He was always in his house. He was like a legitimate guy that John used for things. Everybody in John's position always had legitimate guys like that around them. When he cooperated, he really didn't come to the Ravenite much or to the Bergen Hunt Fish Club. He was more socialized with John more on a family level. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Yeah. He wasn't like in the trenches with us. He was more on a family level with John,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. But that's all true. He helped plan Junior's wedding and all that stuff. Yeah, because that's the kind of things he did. And he was very wealthy. He was a very wealthy, legitimate guy, which is always nice to have around you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just curious about something because I know that there's always lots of rumors that go around, and not everything that's printed or seen in a documentary is true. But obviously, for a long time now, it's been around that the Hells Angels were kind of tied to the Mafia in some way, or that they do other people do work for the mob, or is that no? You have to be.
That's a good question. So, in Montreal, there's a very strong Mafia family in Montreal that was partners with the Hells Angels of Montreal. The Hells Angels distributed all the heroin for them. I was actually in federal prison with one of the Hells Angels from Canada who did business with the mob. The mob guys up in Montreal used the Hells Angels to distribute heroin and to keep the peace. But yeah, mob guys do business. I did business with other ethnic groups. I did business with Latin Kings. I did business with this Cuban. There was a Cuban crew back in the 90s and 80s called the Corporation. They used to call themselves. They were very, very big cocaine dealers, and they had number spots and after-hour clubs. And I had a contract with them to put vending machines in their after-hour clubs, and we did business with the number business together with them. So yeah, the Mafia will do business with anybody. They can make money with the Russians. Michael Francis did business with the Russians. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had another couple quick questions. One is kind of a fun one. How much money, like actual cash, like how much money have you seen at one time? And then the other quick question is, I know the Gambino family was a huge family, a big, big family, but did you ever have, I don't know the lack of how to ask, like a big family event where like everyone had to be there, like everyone was there and all their families, besides weddings, but where you like did something where everybody, basically everyone was there together?
Well,
or was it so big that you didn't even know everyone?
No, I mean, the most money I ever saw at one time was a couple of times I saw like 250,000 in cash, 300,000 in cash at one time. And yeah, so like Christmas parties, but other families, no. The only time we saw other families, we were all together, like all 5 families were at a wedding. Like at my wedding in 1977, all the families were there. I mean, every family had representatives at my wedding, all 5 families. Even guys from Buffalo came. Russell Buffalino, that was on The Irishman, he came from Pittston, Pennsylvania. He came. I got envelopes from Chicago, from New Orleans. So that was but it's not mandatory. I mean, Christmas parties, it's just the family you're in. Like, but you socialize on your own with other families, but yeah, nothing's mandatory.
Okay, awesome. Well, I just want to thank you again, as always, that you always inspire me every day.
Right.
So thank you so much for letting me talk to you. Anytime,
hon. So it says, unfortunately, I will not be able to join your live show, but there is a question I have been wanting to ask you a long time. I would be happy if you would answer it here. You have mentioned several times that your father told you if he got left on the street or disappeared suddenly, you should forget about it and not retaliate. Let us say it was the other way around. If you had gotten clipped or disappeared, would your father have forgotten about it or not retaliated? My father would have never forgot about it. He would have killed everybody. He would have killed everybody till they killed him. He would have never forgot about it, ever. No way. He would have forgot about it, but he was a gangster, and I was his son, and he wouldn't want me to get killed. So no, he would have never forgot about it, not in a million years. He would have hunted them down. No, people would have died. There's no doubt about it. People would have died.
In your experience,
I like that question. That's a good question. Yeah. But if anybody knew Fat Andy, they know the answer to that question. Believe me, I almost got killed a few times. I almost got stabbed up in a club one night. We had a big sit down, and at the sit down, Joe Beck was there. Joe Beck was a captain with the Genovese family because Joe Beck's brother, Petey Beck, was in the club that night, and one of his friends tried to stab me, and we had to sit down. Joe Beck, if anybody knows Mafia history, he's a famous name. He was a big heroin smuggler back in the day in the 50s. He was a very famous wise guy with the Genovese family. And I had a beef in a club on Queens Boulevard, and somebody tried to stab me, and my friend happened to see it, and he hit him on the head with a ceramic ashtray, and the knife fell. And we had a big brawl in the club. And then we went on to sit down, and actually, so this is a story I really never told because, my mind, I have to save some stuff. This was in the 70s. And this happened in a club on Queens Boulevard called the Monastery. And this guy, Petey Beck, was in there. He was Joe Beck's brother. And Joe Beck was a captain with the Genovese family. And we had a beef. And this kid tried to stab me. And like I said, my friend Sal hit him on the head with an ashtray. And back then, they used to have big ceramic ashtrays on the bars because we all smoked back then. And he hit him on the head, and the knife fell. And we had a big brawl. We had a big brawl in the club. So a couple of days later, they sent for us to sit down because now they knew that we were trying to kill this kid. He came from Mott Street. This kid from down Little Italy, because that's where Joe Beck was located, in Little Italy. This kid came from Little Italy. His name was Mush. The kid's name was. It's a funny story because So his name, this was in the early 70s, like 72, 73, like that. I don't think I was married yet, so it was probably around 73. So we had to sit down and they wanted us to accept an apology and from this kid Mush. And my father told Joe Beck and his brother, so if this kid would have killed my son when we were in the funeral parlor and my son was in the coffin, I'm supposed to take an I'm sorry. This kid Mush stopped coming around, you know. But so my father agreed not to kill him, but they didn't trust my old man. You know what I mean? Like, and so the kid stopped coming around. Like, he stopped coming to the clubs. We didn't run into him no more, and that was the end of it. In 1979, I'm in Arthur Kill State Prison. I'm in New York State Prison. And this kid rolls into the prison after all these years. And I'm up in my room in C Block. And my friend Freddie, who was with us the night of the beef, because he was my co-defendant, he comes running up to my room and he goes, "You'll never guess who's in the fucking yard. Mush, that kid Mush is in the yard." I go, "Mush? From Mott Street? Mush?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Go get him and bring him up here." The kid was trembling, so the kid knew I was there. The kid was a nervous wreck, and the kid came into my room. He was trembling, the kid, and he was humble, and we were in our early 20s. He was just so apologetic because he knew I had that jail on lockdown. I mean, he was fucked. I mean, I had the COs on the take. Tommy Bilotti was running the whole prison. The guy that got killed with Paul Castellano. I had the lieutenant on the take. I had the COs on the take. I had the cop, the CO in the package room on the take. I mean, I was getting marijuana in there by the pound. I mean, we had the whole jail on lockdown, and Mush knew it. So he was terrified. I mean, he was terrified. So we basically kissed and made up, and we became friends after that. But that's a good story. Yeah, I haven't told that story in a long time. Oh, St. John. Okay, so we're planning on coming up to New York to do another mob tour, and it's probably going to be we'll probably tape it at the end of June, and then it will be available sometime in July. I'm figuring after it's edited. It's going to be a real professional job. We got a camera crew coming in from Tampa. It's going to be really done well because we got a really good response to the last one we did. So we're going to step up the production and put together a really good one. And we're going to go to the St. John Cemetery. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to tell a story. And I'm going to start out with the graves of Murders Incorporated, of Frank Abadando, the Dasher, Happy Mayoni, my first wife's uncle, who's right across the thing from my wife Alice, who unfortunately passed away. And then we're going to do my father's there, John Gotti's there, Tony Lee's there, Carlo Gambino's there, Neil Della Croce is there, Roy DeMayo, Sonny Francis is there, Carmine Giganti, Vito Genovese, Willie Boy Johnson. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I got a whole list of names here of people that are buried in St. John's. So we're going to do a little mob tour of the cemetery. Hopefully, we won't see no ghosts or anything. And we're going to do the Ravenite. And I have an idea with the Ravenite. I'm actually going to try to get inside to the Ravenite. I'm going to ask the people that work in there if we could come in with a camera and maybe do a quick run through, and I could explain to everybody exactly how it looked when I first walked in there in like 1970. I think that might be kind of cool. We got to try to do that. I don't think anybody has done that. I mean, all they could say is no, right? If they don't want to let us in, we'll try to get there early in the morning when there's no customers. We're going to do that. And we're going to do the bar that Goodfellas was filmed in, where Billy Batts got murdered. And we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff, so stay tuned. Thank everybody for tuning in to Reform Gangsters, and don't forget, like I said, if you like our content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, don't forget about Patreon. Membership start at $1, so please become a member and check it out. Stay safe. If you enjoy my show, please join my Patreon. Ask your questions live. And please join my Patreon at reformgangsters.com.